And welcome to another edition of Trader Talk TV. Today we've got Dean Bubley in the office. Dean, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks a lot.
Dean's a telco expert, and he's here today to talk about network ad blocking. Before we do that, Dean, just give us an overview of what you do and your consultancy, please.
Yeah, I work for a company called Disruptive Analysis, which is my firm. I'm an advisor to telecom companies, regulators, investors, industry vendors, and others. I'm quite opinionated as well. So,
excellent. You'll fit in well here.
As the company name suggests, I tend to sort of say what I think.
Okay, excellent. As you know, 3 and Shine are rolling out their network ad blocking in the next couple of weeks on a trial basis. But we brought Dean in here today to talk about the actual technology and will it work. So Dean, let's talk about ad blocking.
Yeah.
Overview first, and then let's see if it actually works, because that's the big question.
Now, first off, I mean, there is a recognition that some people either don't like adverts or some adverts are a bit heavy-handed.
Yes.
Either because they're big chunks of video or they're intrusive or pop-ups, the usual thing. So there is a lot of interest in some sectors around stopping those. And equally, there's an awful lot of interest on the publishers and advertisers side in limiting the damage from that. And I think that we're moving towards that. Now, there's 2 basic ways of doing this, either on a PC or particularly on a phone though.
Yeah.
And the one we're familiar with from a PC is where we block adverts in the browser.
Yeah.
We basically look for adverts, which usually you can tell with servers or some other signature, and we stop them as a browser plugin. The other approach is to try to use something in the network, in the core of the network, which spots adverts before they even get to the phone or the browser, and stops them there. I'm going to put my hand up and say I think this was actually my idea.
Your idea?
About 5 or 6 years ago, I wrote a blog post where I flew this as a kite, and saying, perhaps this could actually be a possibility. 6 years ago, it might have been a good idea. Now, I think it's neither a good idea nor a workable one for various reasons.
And why is it not workable now? Let's go into the detail of that.
This is because of when and how adverts appear, particularly on mobile phones.
Yeah.
Now, on a PC, all your internet adverts pretty much come from a browser. You look at whoever's website and you get text or video or banners or whatever. It also happens on a phone, but primarily on a phone we use apps rather than the browser. And in-app advertising is much harder to spot in the network. It varies depending on the app, and some are more sophisticated than others, and some are sort of what are called hybrid apps, where you almost have like a mini browser inside the app.
And why is it harder to spot, Dean?
Right, and it's hard. I mean, the typical sort of in-app advert might be things in Facebook or Twitter's timeline.
Yeah.
And the thing is that often, and increasingly now, we have encryption all the way between the device, through the network, through the internet, and out to wherever the app is delivered from. And that is encrypted end-to-end for a whole variety of reasons: security, privacy, worries because of Edward Snowden, and all the rest of it. And what that means is if the ads are put in encrypted form in the app, you can put anything you like in the middle of the network, but you're not going to be able to do very much about it. Right. The difference is if you do, on the other hand, are looking at the web on a mobile browser, then potentially you can spot the ads being served from the ad server. Now, there is a possibility that the ads get blended into the web page in a more sophisticated fashion, and they're difficult to discriminate as well. So, what this tends to mean is that there is a significant limit of what a network-based ad blocker can theoretically do, and that's likely to get more difficult because of the rise of encryption technology, what are called VPNs, virtual private networks, where you put up a secure tunnel through the network, and that's partly for security, but you're also seeing that being adopted to stop the people in the middle of the network, whether it's your operator or whoever else, from fiddling around.
So that's the reason why when the initial press release, Facebook's ads were to be blocked, because it's in-app, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
And as I say, there's some in-app adverts which might be spottable by this, but the more sophisticated, and ironically, the big companies like Facebook and Google are probably the hardest to spot.
Right.
Whereas if you or I wrote an app tomorrow, we probably would have more web-style ads which are easier to see, and we have a third party delivering it.
Yeah.
So, ironically, it will be the smaller app providers who are the most exposed to this.
Yeah.
The other thing that's worth noting is that Yeah, depending on who you are and where you are, a big chunk of most people's smartphone traffic goes via Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Which is usually at home, it might be in the office, it could be in a cafe or a school or wherever. And clearly that's going to go from a different path, and there's pretty much none of the fixed operators who do Wi-Fi into homes and businesses are talking about ad blocking.
Yeah.
They just have such huge volumes of traffic, and frankly they are more worried by Netflix, let's say. Yeah. In the big scheme of things, advertising doesn't take up that much traffic on a mobile device, and it certainly doesn't take that much on a fixed connection.
And there's quite a lot of people who would go into a Starbucks for work or home and immediately go on the Wi-Fi, so network connection doesn't matter at all, basically.
Yeah. So to some extent, you're only ever going to sort of have the ads blocked a proportion of the time, whereas if you've got something on the device, it should do it no matter what connection you're on. Now, there are variations here depending where you are in the world. If you're living in a developing country and you have a very, very small amount of data that you pay by day or whatever, and you have 30 meg a day, then clearly 5 meg of adverts is a material impact on you, particularly if you don't have the money. But if you're on a 5 gig plan, in the big scheme of things, do you really care about saving yourself 50 meg? It's 1%, maybe 2-3%. So perhaps you're saving yourself 10 pence a month. Is it worth it? And on the flip side is, if you're the network operator, everyone's talking about trying to monetize data and, in theory, even charge the advertisers for the privilege of transmitting the adverts and probably some information and big data and analytics and targeting. But it's not obvious to me there's actually a huge sum of money, even in theory, even if it works.
So what's the logic behind it? What's the rationale?
That's a very good question. Now, some of this is, it makes good press.
Right.
Everyone's talking about this.
Yeah.
So
it's free press, isn't it?
It's free press. And it sort of looks superficially customer friendly. We're helping you protect your data plan. We're looking after you. And also, there are adverts that do irritate the hell out of people.
Terrible.
And particularly, you're swiping down and something pops up and it's a link to an app download page or whatever, or it's video that auto plays, or there's undoubtedly apps that behave badly, and most people would quite gladly see the back of them. The question is whether the advertising industry keeps getting involved in this sort of escalating game of sort of attack and counter-attack, or whether there's a sort of perhaps a little bit more ownership of the user experience. I mean, one of the reasons that Apple allowed ad blockers to be installed on iOS is because it was Apple cares about the user experience deeply.
And don't care about advertising.
They care a bit, right? Because they're interested in keeping the ecosystem going, and they're dependent on people buying phones to look at web pages, to look at apps, all the rest of it. But I think that they're quite conscious of the fact that some step beyond the boundary. And if there's a way of sort of reining that in, then they're probably, Apple being Apple, has less equanimity about enabling it. So I think there's also some interesting questions here about regulation and reputation.
Right.
Now, the interesting question is how discriminatory this blocking process is, and does it block everything? Can it block everything? Do you run into what is called in the medical industry false positives and false negatives? False positives are when you block something that shouldn't be blocked, and false negatives are when you miss stuff, which is what we're talking about. There are various things that shouldn't be blocked. First thing is if it mistakes something which is legitimate information or content, and it says, "Oh, that looks like an advert." So that's one type of risk. The other is adverts which shouldn't be blocked for other reasons. So for example, we have a referendum coming up here in the UK.
We do.
Is it legal to block government information about voter registration?
No.
I don't know. I have no idea. It's possible. I don't know. But it's a legal question. Is it legal to block adverts for your competitors? So if the Three Network blocks an advert for Vodafone, does Ofcom and the Competition Commission particularly care about that?
Interesting.
And interestingly, above all, is given that a lot of telecom companies, one arm doesn't speak to the other, do they end up blocking some of their own adverts inadvertently, which would be quite embarrassing around the boardroom table?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of risk here, and then there's reputation ones as well.
So there's a very boggy terrain we're about to get into here.
I don't know. What happens if you block an advert for a charity appeal?
Right.
There's an earthquake.
Yeah.
Or get your tax return in by tomorrow.
How do they distinguish that? Because it seems to be an indiscriminate technology in many ways.
Potentially. I mean, there are ways you could theoretically whitelist it, but then you have to administer the whitelist. You have people to do that. You need lawyers to scrutinise it. You need people to deal with the customer inquiries. So if they phone up saying, "I thought you were blocking blocking ads, but I seem to have been charged for this," or "Are you blocking that?" And then you think, well, do I have to re-engineer all my IT systems to answer that question? So at the end of the day, you might appear customer friendly by saying, we'll block the adverts you really don't like, but what are the other costs and what are the other risks that entails?
What happens if they can get the rest of the telcos to get involved? Do you think that would make a bigger difference, or is it still going to have the same problems running?
The encryption is pretty much uncircumventable, unless you get there's parallel tracks going on in law. There's the Investigatory Powers Act that's going through Parliament this week, and so if the government says we're banning encryption, which I don't think it will, then yes, but frankly, that's based on security arguments. It's not based on advertising.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of these factors which are orthogonal to this whole discussion, and I don't think every operator is going to do this for every user. You've still got this sort of Wi-Fi issue. If you're using Wi-Fi, you still get adverts. I just don't. I'm not convinced it's going to work.
No.
I'm not convinced it's going to create additional revenue, I'm not convinced it isn't going to create bigger problems elsewhere. There's unintended consequences.
So do you think the trial will just be a trial and then disappear, basically? Isn't it kind of a face-saving exercise from 3, given the fact that their relationship with Shine is quite interesting?
Well, the interesting thing is 3 has already announced something in Italy along the same lines. Now, I haven't seen any results from that report. And to be honest, some of these issues have been talked about for a while, and we are getting better at doing things like discriminating. There's a ton of clever stuff around artificial intelligence and machine learning. So some of the problems I've just talked about, maybe you can apply software and clever people to it and you fix some of them.
But it seems the effort, the return doesn't seem to be there for them.
I genuinely am not convinced that there is that much improvement in user experience to be gained. You might get rid of some of the most egregious examples.
Which would be a good thing.
Which would be a good thing. The question is what's the collateral damage that comes with.
And
that's the problem.
One last thing, and you said it before we actually went on camera, was that the ad blocker rates seem to be higher in India and China because of the data plans. And do you think that's the case?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I was reading something yesterday saying ad blocking statistics are themselves, like all statistics, a murky art. And it certainly makes more sense if you are in a developing economy and you have a smaller data package. You're much more attuned to managing it more parsimoniously. Whereas increasingly, I question, for the average, this is average, what will be the low-end consumers, do we really care about 2 or 3%? If we cared enough to try to sort of save 2 or 3% of our data plan, or even 5% or 10%, we'd probably do more shopping around for it.
Yeah.
And how often do we do that?
Very rarely. Or do we?
Not that much.
Yeah, well, I don't anyway. Dean, thanks very much for this overview. It's fantastic to get an insight into how this works, and it's certainly interesting to see what happens 3 in the trial and the next one. We'll probably get you in again in the next couple of weeks to talk a bit more about that. And thanks again for coming to the office.
Thank you. Cheers.
And that was Trader Talk TV, and we'll see you next week.